I think Dharmendra came through the Filmfare United Producers Talent Hunt, which involved 6 producers and Filmfare, and all 6 of them would sign on the winner. And I think he was the first winner of that contest before Rajesh Khanna came on later on. And I think it was in the late 50s when he came. And he was chosen because of his total personality and, the presence he had. And they thought that he could be trained in the rest of the aspects of acting. So I think it turned out to be one of the most enduring discoveries made by that talent hunt. No, actually, after the talent hunt, he did quite a few films, but the earliest one I think was Dil Bhi Tera, Hum Bhi Tere. And gradually, he started getting used to the whole idea of acting, because he was a very shy person. He had come from a small town called Pagwada, I think, and he was a booster pump operator to begin with in his life. And then he picked up pretty well. And I remember Rishikesh Mukherjee used to always say that he was his favorite because he was a director's actor. And you can mold him into, whatever you wanted to. So he gave some of his best performances with Rishikesh Mukherjee. And the turning point in his life, I would say, was I Milan Ki Bela, where he came face to face with the then superstar Rajendra Kumar. Rajendra Kumar had this reputation of being a Jubilee star. He was consistently giving Silver Jubilee hits. And in that confrontation, I think Dharam had an edge over him. He completely outclassed him, in terms of looks, presence, and the way he acquitted himself. And that made a vast difference to his career. And people started taking him seriously, and then they wanted to cast him in big banner films. And then came Phool Aur Patthar with Meena Kumari. Meena Kumari was very fond of him those days, and she suggested him apparently for that film. It was O.P. Ralan's film, and then that film cast him in the role of a macho man. He was probably the first, macho hero in that sense, who came bare-chested on the screen, and he showed, a virile image. And thereafter, there's no looking back for him. He dominated the later 60s, and then he continued until the Rajesh Khanna wave affected his career to some extent in the initial stages. But then he was the only one who could withstand the Rajesh Khanna wave. He remained the next best. He always found it was safer to be the number 2 hero than the number 1, because you really didn't have to strive hard to sustain your position. At the same time, you got the best of everything, He stood up against the Rajesh Khanna wave, which literally swept every other hero off his feet, Most of them. I think there was a time when Jitendra was emerging. He was very badly affected by the Rajesh wave. Even Shami Kapoor, who was dominating until that time, had a tough time coping with the situation, because even in a film like Andaz, where Shami was the real hero, Rajesh Khanna got credit, for whatever he did. But Dharmendra was the only hero during that period who sustained himself, and then he consistently came up with box office hits. And he and Hema, actually, they had about 16 Silver Jubilee hits almost in a row, one after the other. And that really kept him going, apart from the fact that he got some very good films to do. Rishikesh Mukherjee believed in him, and he cast him in a film called Chupke Chupke as a comedian. He had the streak of, the comedian in him, but not many could exploit it well. Most of the time he was asked to make faces, but in Rishikesh Mukherjee's films, like Chupke Chupke, he really, came across as a very, very interesting comedian. Meena Kumari and he made a good team. I think they had a few earlier films which were not that effective at the box office until Phool Aur Patthar came and changed the entire equation. But then she did help him to some extent, but I think more by the way of helping him with his performance and things like that. But apart from that, by I Milan Ki Bela, he had started asserting himself, and he had found his niche by that time, and then he was slowly, growing into the to be a good actor as well as a bankable star. Dharmendra was a very shy person, and he could fit into almost anything. But he had that image of a shy, sensitive lover. So he's worked in many films like, Bandhani, Anupama, and quite a few films of that kind, which were, very which are remembered for Dharmendra's sensitive portrayals. But apart from that, I don't think you could call him as a romantic hero in the way you could call Rajesh Khanna a romantic hero. Dharmendra was a very sensitive, lover image he had, and that I think he kept that up quite well with a little comic elements thrown into it. Those days, romantic films, there used to be more love than, this running around the tree kind of thing. It was there, a couple of duets and things like that. But then there was a greater intensity in the relationship between the hero and the heroine. So it was not really romantic in the sense that in the later heroes, like even Rishi Kapoor was, to a great extent, a romantic hero. And Dharmendra fitted that the role of a sensitive lover, who could protect his woman and who had that chivalrous attitude about him, That helped to a great extent. But I don't think Naya Zamana was such a major film of his at that time. There are others, like, quite a few. But it was very difficult to classify Dharmendra into any one kind of slot, He did various things quite effectively. Like I said, Rishikesh Mukherjee used to always call him as a director's actor who could be, cast into any mold. And that's what was his advantage. He really fitted into any role because it's very easy to cast him in any role. There was nothing like, he was an action hero or he was a romantic hero or he was a comedian. But action he was very good in the later stages, especially they always had that one line mouthed by him, like, kutte kamine, tere khoon pee jaunga kind of a thing. It was constantly became a trademark Dharmender kind of a threat. That's the way he used to threaten the villain more than action, which highlighted Amitabh Bachchan's action scenes later on. I always felt Dharmendra had an innate sense of humor. He could laugh at himself sometimes, and he could laugh at anything. I do remember whenever you spoke to him, he would always come out with these one-liners, which are very funny, really. So I think Rishida was one of the earliest directors to spot that, and he brought it out very well in Satyakam, where he spoke Hindi, the professor who would, who specialized in Hindi, and he did it brilliantly. But Rishida also brought out the silent lover bit in him in earlier films like Anupama. And there was this crusading officer in Satyakam. Satyakam, Rishida always thought was Dharmendra's best film, and he always felt the film to be one of his best because he expressed himself in that. And Dharmendra was, was reflecting what Rishida stood for and what he wanted to convey through that film. And that is the reason why, he always thought Dharmendra was the actor he loved working with, for the simple reason that, he was essentially a director's actor who could be cast into any mold and who could come up trumps, any role, like, It was amazing how he could do that with Rishida, because Rishida had the patience to deal with someone like Dharmendra who would explain to him, and Dharmendra was very good at, working in a situation where everything was conducive to good working, good performances. They started branding him as a He-Man after Phoola Pattar, I think. Actually, that is where he came out as a very strong action hero. And then it continued, like once they discover that you're good at certain things, they continue to, repeat that particular aspect of yours. So Dharmendra gradually became an action hero, and it more so in the 70s, when Rajesh Khanna was taking the film towards a romance and a different kind of the musical with the typical Nasir Hussain brand of romantic musicals. Dharmendra was handy as the action hero because action films always were in vogue. And from there, the Amitabh Bachchan syndrome also began from the mid 70s, when he came up with Ranjir. So during that phase, when Rajesh Khanna's phase, Dharmendra was the action hero because he was the only one of the kind, who could fit into this kind of thing, and he was very popular as well. And then again, when Amitabh Bachchan became number one, Dharmendra still continued to be in the same slot because he was equally good, in combining that macho image with a little bit of fun. And he could be witty at times, and he could be that romantic action hero kind of thing, They had different classifications. So I think gradually Dharmendra became a kind of all-rounder who could do various things, So that's why. But action still, because of his physique, during those days, heroes were not really known to have a great physique. Even Devanand did some action films, but nobody cast him in that role often enough. And then not even Rajesh Khanna could fit into that bill. So that slot remained with Dharmendra for a long time, even right up to the 80s when Anil Sharma succeeded with a film called Hukumat. Hukumat let loose a series of action-oriented films which were very popular in the B and C centers. So that established Anil Sharma, and Dharmendra played a very important role in, sustaining that brand of action film. Yeah, I think somewhere in the 90s, it was not actually 80s, somewhere in the late 90s, they started making a kind of film which are finished within a budget of 20-25 lakhs, And they would shoot with 3 or 4 cameras together. And Dharmendra did act in a few films of that kind. He did it very professionally. He thought there's no harm in, giving 3 or 4 days and then charge your fee for that, and that's what he did. And of course, the conservative elements in the industry said that he shouldn't be doing those kind of films, but he never bothered. He did make those films, but it was very easy. The entire schedule wouldn't last more than a week, and then he would finish the film and get his fee, and that's about it. I think not many, but he made quite a few films. I think it was sometime in the 80s. Some foreign publication named him among the 7 most, good-looking men in the world or something like that. I'm not exactly sure of the detail. Sorry, can I repeat this? I shouldn't be saying that. It's 6, I think, 6 or 7. Doesn't matter. Okay. Okay. I think sometime in the 80s, he was adjudged one of the 7 most good-looking men in the world. I think it was justified because in Indian cinema, in Hindi films at least, and he was considered the most handsome and the well-built hero during those years. Until of course Vinod Khanna came sometime in the 70s, I think, late 60s or 70s he came in. But Vinod started as a villain and then he became a hero. These were considered the best looking guys in the industry, because looks were not such a uh, popular thing those days. Looks never really contributed to the success of a hero. Looks, in the sense, the typical handsome look. Actually, they preferred, I think, rugged-looking guys. Like if you look at all the number ones, they were not really very handsome. Even Amitabh Bachchan or Rajesh Khanna or earlier Dilip Kumar, they were, different looking men, with whom the average Indian could identify himself with. And that's the time when Dharmendra, stood out as with his Greek god looks like. That's what they used to describe in the newspapers those days. And that stuck on to him, and then he went on and on for a while.
Of course, him and Hema Malini, Dharmendra and Hema Malini. When did it all start, and you have your own experience with it?
I think the Hema and he started working together. I think in the 70s. I think they formed one of the most successful romantic teams. Like I told you earlier, about 16 to 17 slow Ghibli hits they gave together. So I think that spilled onto the personal life. I think I want the water. I'm cold resistant, but not heat.
Yeah.
I think Hema and Dharam made a very popular pair in the 70s. I think after Sholay, the relationship seemed to have changed dramatically, and the on screen chemistry uh, and the on screen relationship they shared, it spilled onto their personal lives, and they fell in love. I think Hema was a little resistant in the beginning because he was already married. But I think gradually, I suppose, they couldn't stop themselves, and they got married. The most interesting part of their marriage was that it was not, frowned upon by anyone, in spite of the fact that Dharam was married and he was marrying a second time, and nobody really seemed to be upset by that, because it didn't become the kind of scandal it could have become today. And also the reason was that both Hema and Dharam were highly loved individuals. Like, they're very popular, on and off screen. And Hema had a very clean image as a person who was professional and never got into any of the other, scandalous happenings or any of those things. And Dharam also had a very popular image. He was very good with the press, and except, of course, there were one or two. I mean, he used to have a constant run-in with a lady journalist called Devyani Chaubal. So which led to a few unpleasant happenings. Otherwise, he was extremely popular with the press, and then he had a very, you know, good equation with the press.
And from his family side, it was not resisted the entire marriage. What's your view?
I don't think Dharam's family would ever resist what he does. So it never really came out. Nobody ever really spoke about it. The least of all the family. And even if it was there, I mean, it's very difficult to, find out, whether there was a resistance or not. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think there was any vocal resistance from anyone in the family. I don't think their marriage could be questioned legally if the wife had no objection. That's what I understood about the whole thing. And since that wasn't there, and it was acceptable to everyone in the family, at least that's what it seemed. So there was no problem. I think that both Dharam and Hema had terrific on-screen chemistry, and even off-screen they were, very I mean, low key, but they had a good rapport. That's it. They never showed off like what happens these days, or with so many other, romantic couples. They kept it to themselves, and nobody got to see them together uh, often in public, except at uh, formal events or functions like that. Otherwise, they kept to themselves. I don't know. There was very little exposure, and also there are so many restrictions, and even the press couldn't cross certain limits. Today, I'm sure it would have been a total different scene. They couldn't have been that secretive as they were at that time. I think people just loved them. People. I mean, their fans, the audiences loved them. So that's why 16 or 17 consecutive hits they had, and there's a huge record. Only after marriage, of course, they avoided acting together. Very sporadically they came together. They did a few films together, which didn't do as well as their earlier films had. So slowly the teaming, ended, and also the Hema was diversifying herself. She was concentrating more on dancing and other aspects, and she tried filmmaking as well. She made some television shows and directed a couple of films. In fact, one of the films directed by her was Shah Rukh's earliest film. Dil Asna Hai or something like that. Actually, forgot the name, but that was a film she did in which she cast Shah Rukh. It's a very perceptive casting so early in Shah Rukh's career. I was very amused when Dharmendra entered politics. I'm sure he didn't know what he was doing, but he had no political inclinations any time in his career. As far as I know, he never had any political leanings. I think it must have been just one of those things, because his wife became an MP. I think he must have thought that why should he remain behind? So he must have also gotten into it. Unfortunately, uh, BJP lost that election, and I think he couldn't enjoy as much as Hema had, before that, when BJP was in power.
Um,
I think you can't really judge a person's contribution or a person's achievements through awards. If you see certain people never get, like if Vijayanand seldom got an award because even nobody thought of giving him the lifetime achievement award. So was Nasir Hussain. Nasir Hussain was consistently successful as a commercial filmmaker. I think he had some 11 hits in a row. And he's the guy who discovered Shami Kapoor, and he gave some great hits with Devanand and later with Rishi Kapoor. But nobody ever gave him an award. I think there's something fundamentally wrong about the way awards are given. Like you need to have a certain kind of attitude, and all these things work. I think, but that doesn't really mean if somebody hasn't got an award, doesn't mean that he's not good or he didn't deserve to be acknowledged. But I feel awards are like the man of the match trophy. So in a given situation, in a given film, somebody does well, better than the others, and that probably makes a difference. But it doesn't really reflect on your inherent talent. There are so many of them who never got an award right through their careers.
wow.
I don't think Balraj Sahni got one. I reckon him as one of the finest actors ever. So he didn't. And even Sanjeev Kumar, I don't think he got many awards. But either they were given a supporting actor or something like that. If they play a negative role, a hero of that kind would be given a negative, you know, uh, best actor in a negative role kind of a thing, like it happens with Govinda. So this is the kind of thing. I'm not sure Dharmendra continues to work except in the company of his sons. He's very, very attached to both his sons. He's a family man and he loves his family and he would do anything. Like all of them are like that. And that three of them, the three Diols, they, I mean, they live for each other, kind of a feeling they give. They love to be with each other. They love to work with each other, and Apne showed that very much. And then that's the kind of a film I think Dharmendra would do in future. But I don't think he will get into any other kind of father's role, or that typical character actor's role, which is becoming more and more boring now. Like I said, he's a family man. Like he is very attached to the entire family, and he would do everything, anything for them. Like he was very reluctant about Isha Deol getting into films in the beginning. For some way, he felt that she didn't have to, but unfortunately, she was determined, or fortunately, she was determined. And Dharmendra supported that. Once he realized that person is very keen on something, and he wouldn't stop that.